The next generation of great Catholic podcasting is here. This is what your brain has been waiting for. Topics that come up around the dinner table will be given the truth treatment, all from a Catholic perspective. Sit back, relax, grab your cup of coffee, and enjoy the show. You've just joined Monday Mornings with Matt and Kevin.
Monday morning of Thanksgiving week. I know I'm already getting pants that are a little bit bigger. You know, I'm notching another hole in the end of my belt. Not the skinny way, the fatter way. If everyone knows what I'm saying. You know, you kind of getting prepared for a big week of meals. We actually do, Matt. We're actually planning it big here. We actually have quite a few guests coming to our house to do Thanksgiving up big. A couple Americans. My brother's here. It's actually his birthday coming up this Sunday. He's turning 18, big 18 here with us. So we're going to celebrate that big. I'm going to throw in a turkey, stuff in mashed potatoes, all that stuff. We're going to actually talk about that in a minute because Matt has one of the dumbest takes of all time.
One of the dumbest takes over here.
Oh, yeah. One of the dumbest takes I've ever heard.
Do people wish you have, like, is it a thing? Do people know that?
No.
I don't know.
No,
Germans, know what you're doing.
No, that's not true. They actually, a lot of them know about it. Like I've told like colleagues saying, hey, yeah, I got to get a turkey. And they, for Thanksgiving. So I think they actually know about it, but they obviously don't celebrate it. But there's actually quite a few in our group. You know, we have quite a few people over here that are part of the Catholics from the American group who came over and married Germans. So it's actually a decently sized group. They've had children and we have children. So that's pretty fun. It'll be a fun time. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk a little bit about comments on Twitter about the papacy, which is, you know, how can we not cover the papacy in one of our shows? We have to, you know, and we have to explain how we're hyper papalists, man. It's really, you know, one of the worst possible accusations. We are hyper papal. We love the papacy. I mean, just what horrible people we are. And we're also going to talk about kind of an interesting thing. Okay, it interests me. I have no idea if it interests anyone else, and that is the generations from the last 100 years. So the greatest generation, the silent generation, etc. And just kind of, you know, give our thoughts on that. And actually pretty interesting. I pulled up some notes on that from www.parents.com. So parents, like, you know, those who have children. You're gonna be pretty interested in a couple things I have to say about that as well. But we're gonna start. Where do we want to start? Do you want to start with your hot take? Your hot take. Your cold take. Freezing.
Yes. So people know this who know me. I couldn't care less about Thanksgiving food. Like, I don't know why. Nothing about it intrigues me. I don't care. I can go completely without it. I think it's good. I'll eat it. You know, the whole spread, turkey, mashed potato stuff. It's okay.
Matt's holding his fingers like an Italian right now.
Right.
You know?
Where's
the pasta? Where's the pasta?
The Christmas food, yes. We used to have, when I was growing up anyway, we used to have a huge spread of antipasto, so like all the marinated mushrooms and like we would do like carrots and cheeses and different kinds of Italian meats and put it all on like a platter, and all the juices with a marinated eggplant, it would all soak up, and they would put out all this pasta with like shellfish in it, like clams and calamari. That to me was good. So like mashed potatoes is so boring. Like,
come on, with gravy?
I don't like. The thing is, though, but here's the thing. The stuff that you eat on Christmas is kind of like exclusive to Christmas. Like, you know, the antipasto takes a lot of work. It takes time. You put it all together. Or the calamari and the fish with the pasta, that takes time. It's like a special meal. I can have mashed potatoes anytime. I can have macaroni and cheese. I can have string beans any day. I don't see why this is. I don't know. And I have talked to people, and I am apparently very, 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 very alone in this.
It's the mix. It's the mix of everything. Come on, you get a big turkey leg, you get a big thing of mashed potatoes, gravy, green beans, stuffing, all this on your plate, and it's just this glorious mix of.
There's somebody who's listening who agrees with me. He or she is out there, and they're going to put it in the comments.
Italian, right?
Probably. There is a meme. It's like, so Grandma, are we gonna have turkey this Thanksgiving? And she goes, okay, I'm gonna make you a lasagna. But there's somebody listening, Kev, who agrees with me, and they're gonna put it in the comments. And they're gonna
I know Father McKenna says that he is not a fan of pumpkin pie, and I almost didn't invite him on for a podcast again.
Oh, really?
It was really. I mean, when you have that bad of an opinion on something, it's very hard very hard for me to have you back.
That's
on the
one
show.
of
So
those things.
I don't know if I can have you back, man. I'm gonna have to. It's gonna be the Eric and Kevin show from now on. I think.
I like the food. I like it. It just doesn't do anything for me. It's because, like I said, it's so common. Like, all right, mashed potatoes. I had it 4 times last night. I don't know, but pumpkin pie.
I come from a family of 10, so we used to have like 40 pounds of potatoes, and we'd peel like 4. I think it was what it was. It was like 40 pounds. We'd have 20 pies. I mean, we overdid it to the extreme. Like Thanksgiving was ridiculously big for us, and so it's a very special holiday.
That's something that's always intrigued me. How big families eat. I knew a family of like I don't know, maybe like 12 kids, 11 kids, somewhere in the ballpark of that. And I would say, and I remember her telling me like, yeah, we have a nice breakfast every Saturday morning. And I'd be like, well, what is that? And she's like, well, we have to buy 2 dozen eggs. And I was like, that's so incomprehensible to me. Like, that's like 5 loaves of bread. Like, man. But it's what it's like. You got to feed everybody.
It's true, man. My dad would cook up, on a Saturday. He'd cook up a whole like side of ham, straight from the pig. And it was legit.
Did you have a really long table? Did everybody? Because the family that I knew, they had to split their meals because they just couldn't do it. So it was like the 5, like the 5 oldest would feed the younger ones, and then after the younger ones were fed and they would go play or do whatever, then they would eat. They had to split it up. I don't think they ever. I mean, think about it. There was like 11-ish kids, and then the parents. 13 people. Like, that's a lot of chairs. What did you have? Like a really, really, really long table, custom built?
long table, and I guess by the time
did you sit in the same seat every day?
By the time we were 10, I don't know. We still had big.
You did.
We had big meals together, and I guess maybe by that time, some people were standing around, but we ate them together. Yeah, for sure. No, that was one of the best parts about it. Loud and crazy, and now we got all the little kids running around, so it's even crazier when everyone visits together. It's
Are there any one of you who don't like the noise? Like they just want silence, or they like it?
No, I think they like it.
Nah,
that's what we grew up with.
It's right. It's all you know. Yeah, it's all you knew. Want to go hyperpapalism?
We're gonna go from turkey to
terrible
hyperpapalism.
This term, Kev, has been thrown around, and I feel like I've said this the last 2-ish weeks now. Happy Thanksgiving for everyone listening, by the way, this Thursday. Anyway, this term has been tossed around, thrown around, and I'm trying not to get annoyed by it all. But again, a few times over the weekend and to close out last week, these traditional talking heads throw out the term almost daily to the point where like they're associating it with Novozordites. And I think it was Kennedy Hall. I could be wrong, but they're saying something. He said something like, and I'm just paraphrasing here from memory, but he said something like, all these Novus Ordo Pope splainers just can't get this Pachamama worshiper out of their head or whatever. And a point of that clicked to me. And I was like, you know what? Rather than throwing out Bergoglio, they're tossing all of this Catholic teaching out of the papacy out the door. And their conclusions are really erratic. But I've been working on, and I put this on Twitter, and I haven't completed it yet, but I've been working on reading excerpts from the saints to prove that the saints of our past were all hyper-papalist. They all had a devotion or a love or a clinging to the vicar of Christ. And I was reading Story of a Soul. I might have shared this maybe a year ago now because I've read this work of Saint Therese a dozen times, but I put it on Twitter and I called it the hyper-papalism of Saint Therese. So I just want to read this really, really quick. And it made me think too, because I was reading an encyclical, I believe it was, from Pope Leo XIII, who said that we, this apostolic see, hold the place of God on earth. I found that quote to be very powerful, and that line has been the subject of a lot of debate recently amongst the semi-triads. But anyway, so the hyperpapalism of Saint Therese, this is very, very brief from Story of a Soul. And then I wanted to jump in something that Pope Pius XII had to say as well regarding the ecumenical movement. But so just to give a little background here, Saint Therese, remember, she wanted to enter the convent young. She wanted to join at an age that wasn't yet permissible for Carmel. So they traveled to Rome. And she says leaving France was a great experience. Here I'm just talking, I'm not reading anything. She's just saying leaving France was a great experience for me, and she was taken aback by the beauty of Rome. She said, I was,
Can I comment real quick?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
It just real quickly, it just blows my mind. Can you imagine being a 15-year-old and be like, "Mommy, Daddy, can we go to Rome to ask the Pope so I can join the convent?" At 15, man. I mean,
Right.
just imagine the depth of a 15-year-old soul and mind when that is on the.
That's
Sorry.
her country.
Anyway,
No,
that's
that's her
today
country.
we're recording this on Sunday. It's the feast of Saint Elizabeth of Hungary, and you always hear her story, and and she had a husband, she had a couple of kids, and she lived obviously a saintly life. She died at 24, Matt. 24.
A lot of them did.
She died 10 years younger than I am. Oh my goodness, man! I
think
gotta
of like
obviously
Saint Therese, her Saint Gemma Galgani, who definitely didn't like Thanksgiving food. She wanted pasta, and Saint Gabriel of Our Lady of Sorrows. They were all like 21, 22 years old, and they had immense sanctity.
Wow. Anyway, sorry.
No, of course. So so she's walking around Rome, and she writes, day 1 we saw this, day 2 we saw this, and she continues to get blown away by the beauty, the architecture, the sculptures, the churches. She says everything is just so magnificent, and obviously anyone who's even just seen pictures of Rome, I'm sure it's an indescribable amount of beauty. And this is how she speaks of this moment here. So she says, now this is, I'll actually read. 6 days were spent visiting the principal attractions of Rome. And it was on the 7th day that I saw the greatest of them all, Leo the 13th. Just to quickly pause there. That I remember I read that and I was like, wow. So she saw all of these magnificent basilicas and plazas and piazzas and all the statues that line the streets, and just an enormous Catholicity. And she says the greatest sight that I've seen on this trip was Leo the 13th. And she says, so I'll skip down, and then she goes, at 8 o'clock in the morning, our emotion was profound. What a hyperpapalist here. When we saw him enter to celebrate Holy Mass, he blessed numerous pilgrims gathered around him, and then he climbed the steps of the altar and showed us, through his piety, worthy of the Vicar of Christ, that he was truly the Holy Father. So she sat here in awe, watching Leo the 13th bless the pilgrims that came to see him. And I love what she says, as he climbed the steps to approach the altar to say Mass, his piety was so profound that it was worthy of only the Vicar of Christ on earth. And I could just picture her like in such an awe of him. And she says it was in that moment that she felt like, wow, he is truly the Holy Father. She saw in the sensitive soul of hers, this very pious, holy, delicate, docile, sensitive soul, saw him and knew that, like, wow, this is the Vicar of Christ. You think about all these people that are saying, even Ripperger, who's a prominent, recognized and resistist kind of theologian, priest, exorcist, whatever. They have this mindset of don't look at it, ignore him, pretend the Pope isn't there, don't look this way. Like, what would Saint Therese? Imagine if you told Saint Therese that, like, no, stop looking at him. Look the other way. It's not that important. Just read your catechism and stuff. Like, she knew that, like, here is the Vicar of Christ on earth. Those are her terms. Those are her words. And the people who criticize Bergoglio, and rightly so, I've said this many times, Kev, the personality cult around JP2 was huge, and they contributed to it, a lot of these people. So I just find it odd that all of a sudden somebody that they don't like, and that personality cult is just gone and to be tossed away.
Well, and I had recently had an email having somebody ask did I bring on a priest or somebody to refute a video, I believe from last year, from the SSPX official channel on YouTube that kind of dealt with the quote unquote issues with sedevacantism. And I haven't watched it yet, but I know part of the issues is they deal with the issues they see as the issues of jurisdiction, or the lack of jurisdiction that sedevacantists have. And it's like, okay, I can hear that, that's an issue. It's like, wait a second. What are they talking about jurisdiction? They don't listen to the one they call the head of the jurisdiction. I mean, it's like, it's so hypocritical. It's like, wait, okay, so hold up. You're saying that you have this all solved. You have the jurisdiction in the hierarchy, but it doesn't matter. You don't actually have to listen. So
you don't need it.
What are you talking about? I mean, it's purely words, Matt. It's purely blah, 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 blah. Oh, we do all of this. He's our Pope, but we don't care. We don't listen to him. We don't respect him. We don't honor him. We don't obey him.
Right.
It's not a Catholic position. It's just
Not at all.
not. And so call us whatever you want. I mean, you tell me. You tell me. You say we have an issue with jurisdiction, and yes, finding a new pope, that's a problem. I admit it. Okay, what about your issue with jurisdiction? You say you have a pope and you don't listen to him. So, whose issue is bigger here?
Very sticky. Very, 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 very sticky. So that kind of lets me tie in, Kev, to this point that Pope Pius the 11th, or I'm sorry, Pius the 12th made in 1949, and in an address regarding the ecumenical movement. Now, I like this quote here for a few reasons. One, because again, it touches on the papacy, but two, it's an evangelization and an understanding of the ecumenical movement that is never, ever, ever taught today, not only by Francis, but by Benedict and John Paul II, and you can go all the way down the line. So Pius the 12th is speaking here to those who are evangelizing, and he says, now here's the quote: "Therefore, the whole and entire Catholic doctrine is to be presented and explained. By no means is it permitted to pass over in silence or to veil in ambiguous terms the Catholic truth." And then he continues here, but I just want to pause for a second. So immediately he's doing something that all of the previous 5, 6, whatever are neglect: to present the whole and entire Catholic doctrine to those who are not of this fold. And then he says, again, we can't pass over in silence or veil in ambiguous terms. It's another great word there, term. The Catholic truth regarding the nature of jurisdiction, there you go, click, the constitution of the church, the primacy and jurisdiction of the supreme pontiff, and the only true union of the return of the dissidents to the one true church of Christ. That would be condemned by Bergoglio. That would be condemned by Benedict and by John Paul II. He tells them that you cannot, when you're evangelizing, you must present the entire Catholic faith. You must do so not in ambiguous terms, but directly. And not only that, but you must speak to them of the constitution of the church, what makes up the church, the primacy of the Roman pontiff. There we go again. And the union, the only true union, is by returning to this one church of Christ, the Holy Catholic Church. But couldn't again, stand hearing that.
It makes sense, Matt, because I mean, in the end, it's a very simple thing that Christ founded one church. He founded upon St. Peter. I mean, it's so basic, in terms of what we know of the Catholic faith, that it really is mind-boggling to think that people can buy into the idea that all Christians are a part of Christ's church. The bigger,
which Lumen Gentium says, church, by the way, in Vatican II.
It is.
Paragraph 15. I just read
subsisting in, etc. It's so insane that I think people actually don't appreciate how insane it is. It's like, well, it's literally taking apart everything that the Catholic Church taught for almost 2,000 years.
I got to pull it up. So we know that as a dogma of faith, submission to the Roman Pontiff is necessary for salvation. Pius the 12th echoed that in one of his encyclicals, and he echoed, I believe it was Boniface VIII, and he said all of his predecessors expressed the same. Listen to Lumen Gentium. You could Google this and pull up the encyclical or the document and read paragraph 15. The church recognizes that in many ways she is linked to those who, being baptized, are honored with the name Christian, though they do not profess the faith in its entirety. Or, here's the kicker, do not even preserve unity with the successor of Peter. That's the opening sentence of Lumen Gentium, paragraph 15.
So my first question is, what's wrong with Sede Vacantis, Matt? We're baptized.
Correct.
Okay. We're not holding on
win-win.
to. Yeah, it's a win-win. We are exactly. Lumen Gentium proves that we are perfectly fine with Rome because we don't need to be in union with the Pope, according to Lumen Gentium. Thank you very much. Documents of that.
I mean, it goes on to say the Holy Spirit is giving his gifts and his graces, and he's operative among these with his sanctifying power. They have no problem here saying that one can possess the title of Christian and not have the unity of communion with the Roman Pontiff. Like that is explicitly, and people have said to me like, well, you're just exercising private judgment. No, I'm reading it exactly as it says. I'm reading it word for word of what it says. That is absolutely condemned. I mean, it is an entirely new religion presented to you. So again, as you just said, what's the problem? Follow your council, follow your popes. You don't need to be in communion with them to be the title Christian. Go ahead, call
Yeah,
us
and
Protestants.
if you call us
We
Protestant,
appreciate
hey, Protestants are good too because they're probably baptized and
wonderful.
they don't need to be in union
Right.
with the church. So hey,
Right.
we're all good.
So
We're all,
so stop
what's the problem
proselytizing
here?
us.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
rigid triumphalist.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, stop having a problem with this. Why can't we all just get along? Let's have dialogue. Let's just have some nice dialogue and not.
Yeah,
and
let's
just
have
get
a glass
along,
of
right?
water or whatever
Yeah,
Francis said to
come
do
on,
whenever
yeah.
you're feeling distressed.
Oh man, yeah,
So-
it's an unfortunate thing, but it really is. It's almost ridiculous at times. It just is, and I'm not saying the people who are in it are. I understand that there's a lot of blindness. There's a lot of ignorance, and I'm not saying that I'm just this super smart person. They're all dumb. That's not my point at all. If you're born into this, it's hard. Look at you, man. I mean, it's not easy to just to understand it, for it to click, to know all of these things because you've only known this. So I get it. But I think it's the people. When I talk about this, when I say this is ridiculous, I'm talking about people who do know these issues. You know, your podcasters on YouTube who are talking about these things. They're the ones that I'm commenting on. Certainly not your normal person attending one of these churches. Most of them are just trying to be Catholic, and I fully understand that. I know you do too.
So
anyway,
history of the world, history of the world, right?
History of the world. All right, I want to
yeah.
tell everyone about the history of the world.
Man.
Starting, how much time do we have? All right, so Adam and Eve. No, actually, so I want to talk about the generations, and we're going to make this fairly brief.
Yes.
And I don't
No, it's
entirely even know what to talk about. Like, I just had a conversation with my wife the other day, and we were talking about the generations, and I don't know exactly where to go with it. But actually, the website I Googled ended up being a perfect, actually a kind of a perfect separate topic in a way. It's called, again, parents.com. Not recommending anyone go there. I'm going to tell you, first of all, why I went on to parents.com. You would think that's pretty, should be pretty safe. First ad I get popped up is a couple of men kissing and then holding a baby. Yeah, nice, right? So
of course.
so it's immediate. It's like, okay, boom. Here's the type of website I'm on. But anyway, let's look through this real quickly. It's the greatest generation, born 1901 to 1927. Blah, 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 blah. Due to the current events of this generation, raising a family put a premium on traits like hard work and grit. So these are people who are born during the Great Depression. They didn't have any money. They literally had to work really, really hard, in order to have anything, I suppose. The next one is the silent generation. Do you have any comments on that, Matt? I should pause.
I was just going to say, it's funny how people born in that time frame still took a lot of those habits and took them to the very end. I remember a very specific example of my grandfather, who was a member of the Greatest Generation and grew up with nothing and grew up through the Depression. And I remember, like, wow, this had to be in the mid 2000s, so 05 or 06 or whatever. We were all sitting at his table and we were having like coffee or whatever. And some of the milk that he had, at the very, very, very bottom of a milk carton, was spoiled. And I remember my aunt said, "Oh, well, Dad, throw that out." It's and he wouldn't throw it out. He was like, "I know it's spoiled, but I'm good. It's something to drink." And I remember, like, I was thinking, like, "Oh, why would he do that? Like, just go to the store and buy a new one." He had money. He was, well, I guess you would say middle class. They were all right. And I remember thinking, I like, what's the problem? And then so I remember I went home that night and I asked my father about it, and he was like, "Yeah, you got to remember that, like, when you the first 20ish years of his life, I mean, talk about being dirt poor, had absolutely nothing." And so the mindset of, like, I don't care that the milk is spoiled, like, it's still milk, and yeah, I'm gonna get sick of it, but it's still gonna wet my dry mouth for a little bit. Like, their mindset is ingrained in a lot of those things. Those old habits don't die off. And that's one example that I remember that stuck out of that generation to me. But yeah, very, very, very hardworking, could fix anything, very, very handy, and did preach, work hard and take those 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 jobs. And I'm not saying I agree with it all too, but I think that was the
right.
That's what they had to do to survive.
Well, it's interesting too, because I mean, if you think about it, they were really in the middle of this turn of the world from
A huge turn.
old into new, I suppose.
Yes.
The Industrial Revolution was just a couple decades past, and you're going into World War I. You had Fatima. I mean, just a really crazy time. And I think we'll get into the 1960s, but this was kind of the first big shift. It may be a little bit earlier in like the 1860s, 70s, 80s, where you had, and again, you had lords, a lot of these different things happening, because I think that Our Lady was coming to try to help us during these absolutely insane times. Unfortunately, most people didn't listen. So the next one, the silent generation, born 1928 to 1945. So that's I didn't actually know the name of that. I'd never heard silent generation before. Pretty interesting.
Yeah.
They say here the silent generation famously got their name for being so conformist that they were silent through the McCarthy era when the fear of communism swept through the country. That's pretty interesting. I don't really know how to feel about that. I mean, I think communism did spread to the U.S. and it has stayed there ever since. I think you just have a milder form of communism in the U.S. That's a whole nother topic, obviously. But anyway, this says during this era, the kids were expected to earn their way through life using a strong work ethic. So kind of similar to the previous generation.
The way they were, yes. Yeah.
And they were, but I think, I think that's been a little nicer to them, because I think you're starting to get a bit more decadent, a bit more worldly. You're starting to really to modernize, I suppose.
What were the years they gave on that, Kev?
28 to 45. 28
45
to 45. Yeah, that's when they were born. So born within those years. So these are also the people. So that was the last, I guess, the last year when people were going to the Second World War, I suppose. Yeah, that's actually more like the Vietnam.
Well, if they were born, they're not going to be teenagers for 20.
Yeah, right.
Until 20 years later.
But that's more of like my grandparents were born in that era, and you do also see that with them. They're very, very hard workers, but also fairly. The generation, not my grandparents, but the generation, I think we're starting to really be also kind of conformist. They were starting to be educated to really, listen to the man. And I mean, again, purely my opinion here, I think you saw a lot of the communist ideas starting to creep into education, especially in the US, and obviously a little bit later on into the supposed Catholic Church. So the next one, or do you have any comments on that?
No, that's good.
Yeah. Baby boomer generation, born 1946 to 1964. My mom was actually the very ending year of this. You have a book on? Yeah, I often say that they might be the worst generation in the history of man. Probably a little too harsh, but certainly not a good generation in terms of what happened. Especially if you're considering the ones born in the 1940s. Maybe also the silent generation, if you start looking at what happened during the 60s.
That gap, just to jump in really quick, that gap is huge, though, because I think
it is. Yeah.
Really the 60s and the 70s were extraordinarily turbulent. And to me, if I was born in, say, 45, which would call me a boomer, I'm in my late 20s during those eras, whereas I was born in 64. I'm still a boomer, but I'm 2.
Yeah, exactly.
So there is a bridge here to kind of.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's true. I mean, I guess I think of it more. Your true baby boomers were really more 1940s. Yeah, mid 40s to mid 50s. I think 64 is that, to me, that's being a little bit of
you're pushing a new era, right?
That's what they're saying. Yeah, but so they say here. They say, where is it? Baby boomers defied their parents, protested the Vietnam War, and created the quote unquote summer of love.
69. Yeah.
Boomer parents notably redefined parenting by being the first generation to look at their kids' perspective of growing up, and they started to have the concept of family meetings, which I guess that's not bad. But I mean,
what was the first word? They looked at their children's what?
Being the first generation to look at their kids' perspective, their perspective of growing up. So pretty much,
so the thought of like children are seen, not heard, was kind of dying down a little bit.
Exactly. You're starting to ask their opinion. What do you want? How do you want to be raised? It's like,
you want mashed potatoes or stuffing? Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Well, both. Don't ask me those questions. Snack it up. But I think you do start to see in this time the softening of parenting and the softening of society. And I mean, you see that the parents who had come back from the war were so deeply affected, and also so many men never came home, that you had a lot of the culture turning feminine, and even for a reason, it's not even anyone's fault necessarily, that you had children being raised without a father. And so you had a more fatherless society than the generation before. And I guess that might have been the case in World War I in Europe, not so much in the US, but anyway, so you did have this issue that made it so children were starting to be raised softer, and you started to see parents didn't want to be raised, or they didn't want to raise their kids like they had been raised. They wanted to have, give them more. And so you had a softening of rules and boundaries.
Interesting It's interesting though, because they always talk about, um, how the greatest generation raised the baby boomers and how the baby boomers raised millennials and all that. And like, there's never like, I don't know, how did someone in the year 1795 raise their kids? Like,
Yeah.
there never seems to be, I don't know, for some reason we start these sort of conversations with around the late 1800s, early 1900s. I'm just curious, like what was the mindset of parental upbringing or whatever in the, I don't know,
That's a great question.
1750. I don't know.
I think you
In
would have seen
1320.
a lot less education. I mean, a lot less education, a lot more actual life lessons. How do you learn how to live? How do you farm? How do you, and a lot more, especially if you're looking farther back into the medieval time, a lot more of the aspect of eternity, because you died a lot easier. You just didn't
Oh,
have
that's true.
in general, and I know people kind of fight against that, but I think it's true that your life expectancy was not 80. You just didn't live
Right.
that long. There was a lot more death, and people accepted that more. There was not this attachment to life that we have now. I don't think we can possibly understand that now. But people back in the day, they're just like, yeah, okay, we're here, but we're going to die. And if we're going to die,
Right.
we want to go to heaven. Why do you think
Right.
there's so many more Canaanite saints in the 1300s and less in the 1700s?
Hmm.
Far less, far less. And there's a reason. It's because we became much more humanist and we become much more reliant on ourselves and less reliant on God. But it's a really interesting. I think hey, let's talk about
Okay.
that next week, right? And it's a really fascinating.
Yeah.
It's a great question. I mean, I don't know why I picked these dates. It's just what I googled. Okay, next one. Generation X, born 1965, 1980.
They're like
is
the
often
silent generation. They're just kind of lost in
kind
between.
of they're the slacker generation. They lived through the AIDS epidemic, etc., and would give rise to the LGBTQ plus rights. Oh, that's fantastic. Generation X parents were famously the first to use helicopter parenting styles, unlike their boomer parents who famously let their kids stay outside until the streetlights came on. Generation X parents have a tendency to be far more involved with their children's social and educational development. Interesting.
wait.
So I guess that's my parents.
So
Probably your parents.
Generation X. So you said Generation X was more so helicopter parents,
Right.
and they didn't let their children have as much say as the boomer parents did.
That's what they're
Is that
saying.
right?
Yeah.
That's what
So
it
they're
says?
saying the boomers were,
So they like toughened up.
yeah, Generation X
Hmm.
toughened up a bit, but I think they also, yeah.
What do you think about helicopter parents, though? I mean, your kids are still a little bit young, so, but
It's a good question. I think it's a really
what
hard
would your
line.
parents say?
To me, it's a hard line. My parents were certainly not helicopter parents.
They were not.
No, my mom would have been like, yeah,
Go ahead, Kev.
go climb a tree, go
And if
outside.
you fall, that's on you, right?
Oh, totally. And
Yeah.
I greatly respect that. I think it is. There is a line, and so if we did something
Yeah.
dumb, then she would punish us for it and say, hey, don't do that again, unless you want to die, like falling out of a tree or something.
Mhm.
But she also let us make our own mistakes and, let us live and let us be outside. We lived on a little farm, so it was easier that way.
Sure.
But yeah, definitely, certainly not. My parents were certainly not helicopter parents. But I mean, I also had a kind of an abnormal raising. How about yours? Did you have helicopter parents?
Not really, no. No, they kind of, I mean, there were expectations and all of that, but not to the point where like every move was watched. And very similar to yours, like, you know what, like, go ahead. The street lights thing was very, very, very real for me. You go out, you play, and as soon as it kind of get dark, that's when you kind of knew that you had to head back. And you would find your friends by seeing where all the bicycles were piled up and all of that. And that was just understood as okay. Like, if you got home from school and you went over your friend's house and like your parents figured that you'd be home by, I don't know, by the time it started to get dark, there was just sort of this expectation. I think the personal responsibility of young people at the time was far greater than what it is today. I think young people today, a lot of them have no idea that they need to be responsible for themselves. But for me, like, I knew even at a young age, like, okay, I'm going over my friend's house after school. I'm going to leave my bike here, whatever. I know, I know what's expected of me and how to behave appropriately and how to be a respectful guest at my friend's house. And I know that I need to be home. My parents would be expecting me at a certain time. And that was just followed through on. And I think you had that good fear of them that, I have to do what I'm supposed to do, and made you feel safe too, because I had a job to do. There was expectations put on us. So helicopter, no, I mean, I've seen them. I've seen a lot of them, and I think a lot of my friends had it. But I think, again, too, it makes me want to say that, like, sometimes, we paint this broad picture of all the boomers or it's not always the case.
Yeah,
not everybody
of course,
follows along in that. But
yeah,
as a movement, like, yeah, sure, but not everybody agreed. There were people who, were part of that generation who didn't agree with what was going on at all. So,
but I guess if I'm looking at, in the 1960s, the summer of love, these are people who were born in around 1945. So your baby boomers, they are the ones who gained all of the wealth that were earned, by, the generations before them, who worked really hard and the economy boomed from war, etc. And, they were, everything was going
America,
well.
yeah.
Exactly. Everything
Like,
was exactly kind of your picturesque America.
events.
And this
Yes.
one generation just messed it all up. And it really kind of flushed it all away. And then you had the economic disasters of the 1970s, and really they were a mess. And I think you see, I mean, look at, if you look into, let's say, serial killers and stuff as well, I think you'd see that a huge number of them, by far more than nowadays, were back in the 1970s and 80s. You just had a bunch of crazy people in this generation. I know I'm being harsh on the boomers, but to me, it's just it's what I see. Yeah. And I think that it's interesting, though, because if you look at Generation X, I actually think millennials have the chance to be a very good generation, actually, ironically. I mean, I think, unfortunately, I shouldn't say, I don't know if I'd say very good, but they have the chance to be better than the ones coming after us. So let's go into the millennial generation. That's me and Matt. Millennials lived through 9/11, blah, blah, blah. That doesn't really matter. The internet kind of came around. While boomers may accuse millennials of being self-centered and entitled to their excessive use of technology, this generation has proven to actually be incredibly community-oriented and environmentally conscious, which are traits that are being picked up by their children in the next generation. Yeah. So again, I just love, isn't it interesting, Matt, what this website picks for the good? It's like, well, this is a good generation.
They're environmentally conscious.
They believe in saving.
They drink out of
they drink out of exactly. They're drinking out of wood straws.
Because I have a paper cup next to me.
Yeah, that sounds good. Man. Okay, if that's what I'm being judged on, okay, bring it.
I think the thing that's neat about us is that, unlike any other generation, we bridged a pre and post technology world. Like you and I, we've said this before. We know what it's like to go out in the world and not have a cell phone, not have internet, not have anything on it. You just lived your day, like with no influence of screens or whatever. The only so-called screen time that meant TV. That didn't mean my laptop, my iPad, my cell phone. All that screen time was you watch TV at nighttime or something like that. So we remember that world, and but the thing is we lived it. We went through it. We everybody lived that way. But then when all this stuff got introduced, now you find it's hard to break those habits. Like for me, like I always have when I can anyway, I always have my cell phone on me, and like it's hard to say, well, people say, well, you lived in a world without it for years. Well, yeah, I did. But now you don't, I guess you don't know any better. So it's like I'm not much better off than people who only know it, I guess, like because I don't know how to word what I'm saying, but you adjust to the times, and you go with it. And
well, I think
we bridged a lot. The tech boom of the late 90s was a massive change, probably the biggest one since the Industrial Revolution, I would say, in the history of our country, the biggest shift. And you go back and you read like people saying in 95, 96, like, oh, by the year 2002, computers are going to be in 80% of America's homes. And they were like, just like blown away at the thought. And so that's a huge gap for us. I mean, 9/11, there is a pre and post 9/11 world, sure. But we went through a big change that other generations didn't quite. You think of like TV was introduced. The telephone kind of made its way into homes and all of that. So we were a big shift.
But exactly, just having the internet at our disposal is absolutely crazy. It was
strange at first.
We have the reality. We have a little bit of the real world that we experienced again without the internet. We had to look up. Remember Matt's like, I don't know the answer to this.
The catalog.
Go find a catalog. Go find
a catalog.
Yeah, exactly.
You would open up those drawers. I don't even know how I did it anymore.
Ask Grandpa.
It would be a miracle. Yeah, it would be a miracle that I would even find a book. Remember, you'd have to be like, okay, the book that I want, I don't know how you even knew you want it, but you knew you want it, is in G7H4B1. And then you had to write on a paper because you can never remember it. And you had to go and find it. But I remember the first time I left the house ever with a cell phone. And that was the strangest feeling. I had it in my pocket. And I'm pretty sure that I went to one of those old department stores and I was standing in it. And I was like, I have a phone. I can make a phone call from the store. Like that is insane. I
Right.
very clearly remember that. Such wow. A phone call meant you were probably sitting on a chair next to your countertop with the wired phone.
That's so true.
Not
Yeah.
not anymore.
So here's what else parenting.com or parents.com says. They say, so
Sure. About us.
the about us,
Mhm.
they're more likely than prior generations to allow their children to freely express who they are and are leading the movement in helping gender non-conforming kids to be happy
Uh,
with who they are. That's fantastic, right? Well,
accepting.
I'm so glad that we're gender non-conforming. Oh my gosh.
Tolerance.
Don't even.
Okay.
I'm not going to share this link, by the way. Okay, Generation
I
Z.
mean, actually, it's true,
Yeah, it is true,
right?
but
It's
it's
not
like
it's not wrong.
these are the things they're pointing out. It's like, oh, thanks. Yeah, you're saying how great our generation is. Yeah, we're a bunch of perverts, pretty much. Yeah, thanks for that. Fantastic. Okay, Generation Z, born 1997 to 2010. It says, while still youngsters and not old enough to have made their
Mm,
marks as a generation, Generation Z kids are the first to be born into a world where you know nothing else besides being constantly connected to one another,
there they go. There you
albeit
go.
through phones,
Okay.
screens, and tablets. Yeah, that's exactly true. And I think that you
Mhm.
see I don't know your experience with the youth of today, Matt, but I've seen a couple 17 year olds. I've talked with a lot of parents here in Germany. I imagine it's the same in the US. They
Mhm.
cannot get their kids to focus on anything. They can't get them
Yes.
to
Yes.
focus on school. They
Yes.
don't want to work. They don't want to do anything. They don't even oftentimes want to go out with their friends. They just want to be online.
I think it's a lot of times because technology is presented to them at such a young age. Like I
Yeah.
know I saw a video of a kid who this was just yesterday. I saw a clip a father posted it. His son was I think 3 years old, he said. His son was 3 years old. And if he doesn't have his iPad, first thing in the morning, he throws a tantrum. And that tantrum will last until he gets his iPad.
Crazy.
And at nighttime, he has to hold his iPad and run around the house. I don't know, to get his energy out before he goes to bed or something like that. It's strange. So a lot of parents are giving their kids these things, presenting to them right away, and your brain is so used to these instant connections and instant pleasures, and you can watch what you want to watch, whenever you want to watch at any moment in time. To live without that is unbearable for them. And I think you and I said this before too. When you and I would go out to a restaurant, for the most part, you sat and you waited for your food to come.
Right.
You sat there and you were bored, bored. You were bored and you waited. And that concept is unfathomable. Now, think about me. If I were to go out to eat, I would probably have my phone out too. Because it's like, what else are you going to do while you're waiting for your food? But yeah, back then, like, yeah, you had to accept being bored was a thing. Those summer days, you're not in school. There's no learning. You're just bored. You're just sitting outside and you're just bored. And that's okay. And now I think there's a fear of that. Oh, my daughter is bored. I have to give her the iPad. She's bored. We have to do something. There's the
Well,
fear of being
and
bored.
this is what's crazy, man. This is scientifically been studied a lot in the last years, and they
Mhm.
absolutely have found that first of all, it is very beneficial for children to be bored. They need to be bored. They need that for
Yes.
their imagination. They
Your
need that to grow
imagination. Yes.
as people. And they've also learned, and there's study after study after study that shows how dangerous and how bad it is for children to have screen time over something like 10 minutes or something. It's something really remarkable. And this is very well researched and very well publicized. People just don't seem to care. You know why? Because people don't want the hard way. They don't want to spend times with their kids. They don't want to just say, I want to sit down
Mhm.
with my kids and play a game, because the parents are the first ones addicted to their phones.
Right.
So how do I get my screen time if my kid's running around saying, Daddy, what am I going to do? Right? I mean, that's just how it is,
There
and
was
eventually
video.
we're gonna rot their brains because our brains are rotten.
There was a video guy did an experiment. I think he had two young daughters, like 2 and 4, somewhere in that age group. And what he did was he videotaped their behavior in a room with their father sitting on the couch with his cell phone, and then their behavior sitting with him sitting on the couch without his cell phone. So in one screen, his two little girls are around the room and he's on his phone, whatever he's doing, and they look up at him and they don't go over to him, or they look up at him and they keep their distance or whatever. But they kind of try to mingle or play amongst themselves. And then in the other video where he doesn't have his phone, he's got his, he's kind of bent over, he's got his hands open, he's watching his kids play. They run over to him and they engage with him and he picks them up. And So like they see even at that age that, you know, whatever concept they have of technology at that young age, probably not all that great. Well, my dad's on his phone, I can't bother him or whatever. But they see like, oh, he's present and he's here with us. They ran over to him and they had their arms open and he picked them up and he lifted them up in the air and all that. So kids perceive that stuff.
I mean, I'm gonna be honest. My kids run in and hit me like no matter what. But
You're right. Either way.
Either way. But no, it's absolutely true. The kids want to do whatever their parents are doing, whatever they see. That's what they want to do because they want to be like their parents. They're going to emulate them. And if all the time you're on their phone, and I admit I am too much on mine as well, then yeah, I don't give them to my kids ever. But it is a problem, and it's something that we have to understand for our own brains too. You know, where's our imagination? Where is our time spent? It's not just for children. I think that's actually really important. You know, back in the day, Matt, you remember, I remember when I was a kid, it was like, I'm bored. I'm going to go draw a picture or I'm going to go write a poem.
Oh, yeah.
Matt, I used to write poems because I was bored.
I used to make
like
books.
A 12-year-old. Come on.
I used to take a stack of papers, staple them, and then I would write and illustrate a little book.
Perfect.
And that would take you like, you know, and then you would color it in. It took time.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you find yourself kind of engaged. And you're right. That kids don't know what to do when they're bored is another thing. Like, okay, I'm bored. What can I go and do? They have no idea. You have to tell them. Why don't you there's no initiative that I've seen much as what our generation had as to what to do with yourself. And I find that even like just seeing different generations of kids play is very different too. Like I remember like, you know, being a kid and you can go outside and gather with your friends and you would invent, I don't even know how we did it, but you would invent the weirdest, dumbest, coolest games to play with yourself. And it would get great. And now you put kids outside and they just stare at each other. They, you know, maybe if they're sports inclined, they might say, oh, let's get a soccer ball or whatever and play. But you don't see them coming up with actual games like we used to. We used to do stuff like what we would call it, like aliens, and I don't know, we would hide up in trees and we would run around and we would have to jump. I mean, you just do stuff. That same drive is not there. They don't know what to do.
Totally. Well, let's move on to the last one. Generation Alpha is born after 2010. There's not much to say about this. And again, parents.com. This is, again, I just want to point out what they say. However, there are a few things we understand. They are some of the first generation born around the COVID-19 pandemic. They're more diverse. They're more diverse than any other generation. They're more likely to be in a single parent household. How sad is that, man? And again, I'm not saying they're wrong. They probably are right. But so they're diverse and they probably don't have fathers. So yeah.
Wow.
Good. It's going to be one heck of a generation. I think you see, you know, everyone keeps saying that the end of the world is coming soon. I think you're probably more likely looking at it at the time when my young children are becoming adults, because boy, oh boy, they've been dealt a bad hand. And again, talking about technology, talking about education, talking about the world we see around us, where they're being told boys are not boys anymore, boys are girls, etc. How can they learn anything, Matt? How can a child learn anything in the world today? I mean, like really, especially if they go to school. I mean, if they go to school and they learn something and they have to come home and you have to say, oh, no, don't listen to that. That's not true. Then what can they listen to?
It's very hard. Yes.
I mean, come on. It's a terrible, terrible thing. And especially if it's a constant thing where you're saying, no, that's not right. No, the Catholic Church isn't the bad guys through history. No, you can't be a girl when you're a boy. I mean, these are things that you're going to have to teach your kids when they come home from school. Hopefully most people listening to this don't have to send their kids to school. Heaven help us, Matt. I mean, very seriously. I mean, our kids are going to have it rough. So boy, we have to raise them as well as possible, so they have all the tools and the strength to be able to overcome the dumbest world circumstances, perhaps in the history of man.
You do wonder what the product is going to be of a lot of these people. You know, I even wonder, like, what are we going to be like when we're like that older age? You know, like the world's going to continue to spin, and times are going to continue to change and evolve, and things are going to be, you know, things that we are not even conscious or aware of yet are probably going to be in our hands as some form of technology, right? You know, and so how are we gonna adapt? Are we gonna be like those people who are holding our phones, like, how do I add on a whatever again? Like, we're gonna be like the generation that we make fun of. Like, what do you mean you can't add a picture to your text bubble? Like, we're gonna be the same way at some point. So it's very interesting to see what the product of all of this is going to be. But again, I would love to see, because again, there's all this talk of greatest generation on. What was life like hundreds of years ago? What was it like raising children or teaching or behaviors that were common?
Well,
I don't know
maybe
what's
I'll
out
say
there. Probably not much on it. It's
I've
probably
got a
one of the
buddy.
problems.
I've got a buddy who's a historian here in Munich, and he studies a hospital. But maybe he might have a little bit of an insight to what a normal life would have looked like back in the. I think he's researching into the 1500s. I think
Oh, really?
in Munich. So I
I
could
would
ask him.
love to
Maybe
hear.
that'd be interesting. I'll ask him if he does, and if he has
Sure.
any ideas, maybe he can come on a show with us. He's been on the show before. Christian, he's a good guy.
Okay.
But it's a very good question. I think probably, as you say, it's probably because we just don't have that much information on it, because
Right. There's probably
people
no documentation.
they
really
didn't
of it.
really write down that much about what they did, because I think there was less education, and I think it was more of a focus on survival, and less of a focus on follow your dreams and all these different things. So,
Or maybe even thinking too, people, like, why would I want to document this stuff? Like, we're such a generation of this needs to be written down and documented and saved and all that. And people probably
well,
think that
let
much
me
of it
ask you
back
this. Let me ask you this, Matt. So we got to go here pretty soon. But I mean, if you think of the geniuses of the medieval era, you think of the Michelangelos, you think of the I can't think of any names right now, but people who constructed these great monuments, who designed these things and painted and wrote, say Shakespeare. You think right now. I'm going to give you 10 seconds to think of. Give me a couple people who you consider right now to probably be geniuses. The smartest people on earth right now.
in today's day and age.
Today's right now. Yeah.
Right. I know.
Who do you think? Do you have any? I mean, I'd say maybe Elon Musk is the one I'd say closest. He's probably, likely a genius. Exceptionally smart, at least. But if you think about it,
Donald Trump did say he has the highest IQ of all of us.
Well,
you did say that.
Trump is going to leave his mark. Yeah, the Trump towers are certainly going to be remembered as genius. That's for sure. But I mean, yeah, but so Elon Musk is creating these things, but and they are amazing. And what they do is really impressive. But are they going to last, Matt? You're going to go 100 years from now. Is anyone going to say, "Oh, that's"? I don't think they will, because we don't create anything that lasts. Right. We're so convinced. We're so focused on now. What can we have right now, this second, that we never think of what will we have in 100 years,
even music-wise.
Oh, for sure. I mean, who's the top singers right now? Miley Cyrus, Cardi B. I mean, awful things. Yes. But their music's horrible. It's awful. Right. It's not even just my. That's not because I don't like it. It's not because it's sinful. It's also bad. There's no musical talent.
But not only that, but they have wealth and fame that's never been seen. Right? Somebody we did the thing on Taylor Swift or whatever. Like somebody said like her overall empire is bigger than that of like, I don't know, like 150 countries or something weird.
Crazy. Like, well, it's a sign of societal collapse. I mean, that is absolutely true. Yes. When you see your singers who are not that talented, Taylor Swift, become some of the most powerful people on earth. That's woo, boy. Well, Matt, it's been fun. Started out with really, really bad.
Enjoy your Thanksgiving. Yes.
I don't want to see any posts from you about anything about turkey or anything. I don't want to see it. I don't want to. I hope you. I won't. I hope you don't enjoy your Thanksgiving, Matt.
I'll sit there miserable. I'll sit there bored.
Eat your gruel.
I'll be bored and I'll draw a book, write a poem.
Sounds good. All right, Matt. Until next week, take it easy.